I'm Steven, 28 years old, and I've been with the company for 5 years now. I'm single, and I work in the sales department, handling office tasks. 2 years ago, I was promoted to a senior position, which means I'm often swamped with work. My subordinates are all contract employees, so they can't work overtime. That leaves the extra workload to me. As a result, I'm always busy, and the only time I can leave work on time is during the first few days of the month. Otherwise, overtime is a must. There have even been times, especially at the end of the month or quarter, when I've had to pull all-nighters. I live in a rental apartment about an hour away from the downtown office in the suburbs. I chose this place because I prefer waking up to the sound of birds chirping rather than the noise of cars. It was a choice I made, prioritizing my living environment over convenience. Still, there are times, especially after a long day, when I wish I could get home quicker. Today was one of those late nights. It took me an hour just to get to the nearest station. The streets were almost empty at this hour, but I noticed a couple arguing among the sparse crowd. The woman broke free from the man gripping her bag and ran away, with the man seemingly chasing after her. I watched them absent-mindedly, thinking they were probably having a heated quarrel. Not in the mood to cook, I stopped by my usual supermarket and grabbed a discounted deli and a half-priced beer. As I walked home from the bright station square, the street lamps' white lights felt like runway lights guiding me home. I pushed my exhausted body forward, but suddenly, I noticed a woman staggering ahead of me. She was walking unsteadily, and I wondered if she was drunk. I hesitated between keeping my distance and overtaking her, but she was moving so slowly that I decided to pass by. As I got closer, I noticed her appearance. She was stumbling, dragging her left foot, and her clothes were covered in mud, especially on the left side. Her shoulder-length hair was disheveled, and she was barefoot. It was a bizarre sight. I thought about saying something, but before I could, she collapsed to her knees. Startled, I instinctively caught her as she fell and called out, "Are you okay?" She seemed unconscious, but she was breathing. I couldn't just leave her there, but I also knew I shouldn't move her. Unsure of what to do, I called out for help. "Is anyone there? Someone, please. We need an ambulance." Despite the late hour, a few residents who heard my voice came out, looking on with curious faces. A woman in her nightwear approached me and asked if the woman was my girlfriend. "No, I don't know her." She was walking ahead of me and suddenly collapsed. "Can someone please call an ambulance?" I said. A man, who seemed to be the woman's husband, said he would make the call and went back inside. Meanwhile, the woman who had approached me kept staring. "Aren't you the guy who always buys half-price Dellas at the supermarket?" she asked. Yes, that's me. I bought one today too. I'm single, so," I replied, feeling a bit awkward. As we were talking, I heard the sound of a siren in the distance. The ambulance arrived quickly, and the paramedics assessed the woman's condition before taking her into the ambulance. Then, one of the paramedics asked if there was anyone who could accompany her to the hospital. Everyone looked at me. Me? Really? I thought, but I was the only one who could explain the situation, so I got into the ambulance and ended up going to the hospital with her. When we arrived, I explained the situation to the doctor. The woman had nothing to identify her, and they asked me if I knew who she was. I had no idea. We had no choice but to wait until she regained consciousness. The doctor said her condition wasn't life-threatening, but her left leg seemed fractured. There wasn't much reason for me to stay, but the police would get involved later, and I'd be questioned again. So I left my contact information and decided to go home. Since I was far from home, I called a taxi, which turned out to be a costly expense. When I finally got home and changed, a wave of fatigue hit me. Knowing I had work the next day, I heated up some deli food, took a shower, opened a beer, and ate quickly before getting into bed. Just as I was about to relax, the phone rang. It was the police. I'd explained the situation to them. just as I had at the hospital, saying I didn't know the woman or her identity. They understood for now, but said they'd contact me again later. By the time I hung up, it was past 2 a.m. What a long day. I forced my eyes shut, trying to sleep, but I could hardly rest. The next day, I miraculously found a seat on the train to work and managed to get a little sleep. It was a relief. Blending into the usual crowd, I headed to work. The day seemed like any other, as if yesterday's incident had never happened. It's amazing how such a significant personal event can have no impact on the world. With that thought, I arrived at the office and greeted everyone with a forced good morning. After the morning meeting, I started my usual work. Another day of the same old routine began, or so I thought. After finishing the task, I looked around and noticed that my boss, Tom, and the section chief, Ken, weren't at their desks. Did a sudden meeting start? Eventually, Tom returned, but instead of going to his desk, he came straight to mine. Why? I wondered, and then he suddenly patted me on the shoulder. My heart sank. Was this the shoulder pat that signals you're fired? But then, surprisingly, Tom smiled. Ken, who had arrived later, was also smiling. Jess, what's this about? I asked nervously, trying to smile back. Tom continued with a grin. Actually, we got a call from the president of our client company, Mr. Smith. He said you helped his daughter last night. That woman was President Smith's daughter. I was shocked. I had just called an ambulance for a woman who had collapsed near my home the night before. I briefly explained this to Tom. This afternoon, President Smith is coming to meet our President Williams, Tom said. He wants you to be there too, so please make yourself available. I'm counting on you. Yes, I understand. The situation seemed to be getting more serious. What's going to happen to me? As scheduled, President Williams returned in the afternoon, and soon after, President Smith arrived at our office, escorted by Tom and Ken. I headed to the president's office. Excuse me, I've brought Stephen from the sales department, Tom said. Oh, I've been waiting, came President Williams' voice from inside the room. I started to feel nervous. Tom opened the door, and we entered the president's office. Sitting on the guest sofa, facing President Williams, was President Smith, with a woman beside him who seemed to be his wife. Sorry to keep you waiting. This is Stephen, the chief of our sales department. President Williams introduced me. Nice to meet you. I'm Stephen, I said, trying to sound confident. When I raised my head, President Smith and his wife stood up and came over to me. So, you're Stephen. I'm Smith, and this is my wife. She wanted to meet you too, President Smith said. Thank you so much for helping our daughter yesterday, Stephen. We really appreciate it, President Smith said, firmly grasping my right hand with both of his and shaking it vigorously. His wife nodded politely and smiled. Let's sit down and talk over some coffee, President Williams suggested, and they returned to their seats. Stephen, the discussion from here on is about a private matter of President Smith, so I'd like it to be off the record. Is that okay? President Williams looked at me meaningfully. Is it all right for me to be privy to such a discussion? I wondered. President Smith continued, I went to the police today about yesterday's incident, and they said we needed your cooperation. So I have the approval of our president here. Understood. If I can help, I'm at your service, I replied. Thank you, and sorry for the inconvenience, President Smith said, thanking me again. Shortly after the secretary brought in coffee, she left, and I waited nervously for President Smith to start talking. After taking a sip of his coffee, he began, Actually, my daughter Stella is a 21-year-old university student. Recently, she started experiencing stalking. I was shocked by this unexpected revelation. I remembered seeing Stella yesterday. Our home is in the suburbs, and her university is in this city. It turns out President Smith's home was quite close to mine. She's in her third year now and has been busy with late-night returns due to being on the festival committee, President Smith continued, sighing as he took another sip of coffee. She hasn't been coming home for a few days. We checked with all her close friends and relatives, but she was nowhere to be found. We were about to file a missing person report with the police yesterday if she didn't return. President Smith placed his hand on his wife's shoulder. Then, yesterday, we got a call from Central Hospital saying that our daughter was brought in by ambulance. We rushed to the hospital immediately. When we got there, she was asleep under anesthesia. Seeing her in bandages and in pain, I couldn't stop my tears. President Smith wiped his eyes, and his wife also brought out a handkerchief. After calming down, he said, "Her doctor at the hospital showed us your business card, Stephen, and told us you were the one who helped our daughter and brought her to the hospital. Seeing it was an employee from your company, I was surprised. I had to call your president first thing this morning to talk about you. I just had to express my gratitude in person. My daughter also wants to thank you." President Williams, who was also present, looked at me. "That's the situation, Stephen. As a company and personally, I owe a debt to President Smith. I want you to help him out as much as you can. I'm asking you to." The president then looked at Tom and Ken and said, "I'd like to assign Stephen exclusively to this matter for a while. Can anyone in the sales department take over his current tasks?" Tom and Ken exchanged glances before Tom answered, "Stephen's current duties involve compiling sales figures from the sales department, organizing reports, and creating monthly and quarterly sales strategy documents based on the analysis. Unfortunately, there's no one else but Stephen who can handle these tasks." "I see," the president said. "So you both have experience with these tasks from your time as chiefs?" he asked Tom with a smile. "Well, in my time, we didn't have computers," Tom replied. "That's right. Ken was the chief until 2 years ago, so he should be more than capable," he added. "That's true, but I'm already swamped with my current role as section chief," Ken said, sounding desperate. "I see," the president said. "Then it's a presidential order. From today, Stephen will be appointed as the chief secretary to the president. I will be his direct superior. Tom and Ken, please take over Stephen's current tasks." President Williams looked at me and said, "I'm sorry for the sudden change, Stephen. You're free to come to the office or work from home. I'll take responsibility for your actions. Thank you in advance." "Yes, I accept with gratitude," I responded, still unsure of what was happening, but determined to manage somehow. President Smith spoke up again. "I'm sorry for involving our company in my family's problems." "What are you saying?" "It's like a child doing a favor for a parent who has been kind to them." "Don't worry about it," President Williams replied. "Thank you so much," President Smith said, shaking hands firmly with President Williams. Tom and Ken stood by, looking dejected. Ken, "I'm sorry. I apologized in my mind." The story of me saving the daughter of President Williams spread throughout the company, and I was treated like a hero. As an afterthought, Tom and Ken, who took over my tasks, were surprised by the workload and reevaluated my abilities, leading to a significant increase in their respect for me. As the newly appointed chief secretary, a position that hadn't previously existed, I naturally had no specific duties. I used my free time to visit Stella at the hospital. The first visit was nerve-wracking. I wasn't sure what to talk about with a young woman, especially one who's a university student. I checked the nameplate on the hospital room and knocked. "This is the president's daughter," I thought, noticing the private room. "Come in," a voice replied. "Excuse me," I said as I entered. It was the lady's voice I heard. I introduced myself. "My name is Stephen from Company ABC. Today, I've come to visit Miss Stella." "Oh my, Stella, this is Stephen, your benefactor," the lady introduced me to her daughter. "Oh no, I'm embarrassed to be seen like this." I heard Stella voice from behind a curtain. Her voice sounded lovely. What are you saying? Come on, please sit here, the lady said, opening the curtain and offering me a chair. Good afternoon. I'm sorry I couldn't come to greet you sooner. I said hello, and when I looked up, I noticed only her eyes were visible above the blanket. What's with that attitude? It's rude, the lady chided her. Stella then slowly revealed her face from under the blanket. Hello, Stephen. I'm Stella. Thank you so much for helping me when I collapsed the other day. I'm sorry for causing you so much trouble, she said, sitting up halfway in bed to greet me. This was my first good look at Stella. That night, it was dark, and she was dirty, so I didn't remember her well. But in the light, she was stunning, with big round eyes and semi-long hair tied back in a braid, likely because she was in the hospital. She looked like a high school student. I was so captivated by her beauty that I stared blankly. Stephen, is something the matter? The lady asked, noticing my lack of reaction. Oh, no, sorry. You're just so beautiful. I couldn't help but stare, I admitted, letting my thoughts slip out. Oh, you're quite the charmer, the lady laughed. Stella's face turned bright red. As for me, my mind went completely blank. The visit started a bit awkwardly, but thanks to the lady's kindness, we soon enjoyed a pleasant conversation. Stella had been scared and agitated right after being hospitalized, but she seemed much calmer now. My visit was allowed because she had regained her composure. During our talk, I found out that Stella attended my alma mater, which was a pleasant surprise and led to a lively discussion. When it was time to leave, Stella asked, Stephen, will you come again? You will visit me, won't you? Stella's mother escorted me to the door. Since her hospitalization, Stella has been so withdrawn, not responding to anyone. But seeing her laugh and talk so much today was a first. Could you please visit again? She asked. Of course. Stella is my junior at university after all. I will definitely visit again. Please take care, I replied. Later, the police contacted me with several inquiries. They asked if I had noticed any suspicious individuals nearby. That reminded me of the couple arguing at the station, which I mentioned to them. The officer seemed interested, suggesting the couple might be related to the case. According to the police, Stella dreaded being stalked on her way home, so she stayed at an internet cafe. Exhausted and feeling helpless, she decided to return home. On the train, she encountered her stalker and fled from the station, but the stalker pursued her. Panicked, she ran into a dark area and wildly dashed through a field's bushes. Eventually, she fell into an irrigation channel and injured herself, losing her bag in the process. The irrigation channel provided a hiding spot, allowing her to escape. After hiding for a while, she thought it was safe to return home. Disoriented and in pain from her injuries, she walked aimlessly until she lost consciousness. Fortunately, Stella's recovery went well, and she was soon able to leave the hospital for home care. This meant my next visit would be to her house. Her home was the residence of Mr. Smith, the president of the company. When I offered to visit, I was invited to dinner instead. The prospect of visiting her home felt far more daunting than going to the hospital, but with determination, I went. Welcome. We've prepared dinner for you, so please stay and eat with us. The lady of the house greeted me with a smile. Thank you for having me. I'll gladly accept your kind offer today, I replied, comforted by her warmth. The president's house was impressively large and overwhelming. I was led to a spacious living room with hardwood floors, which seemed to be the heart of the house. Stella appeared in a wheelchair. It's been a while, she greeted. Stella, I'm sorry for not visiting sooner, I apologized. She had returned to her semi-long hairstyle, which I thought suited her age better and looked quite cute. President Smith was at home and emerged from the back. Hi, Stephen. Thanks for coming on your day off. Oh, President Smith, thank you for inviting me to dinner today. I will take you at your word, I said. Well, it's my wife's cooking, so please enjoy. And since it's a day off and we're informal, Please don't call me President. It doesn't feel like a break, he requested. Then how should I address you? I wondered aloud. Well, Dad would be nice, he jokingly hinted, his face turning red. No, that's a bit much. How about Kevin? I suggested. Well, that seems appropriate, he said, though he looked slightly disappointed. The dinner prepared by his wife was delicious. How do you like it? Is it to your taste? She asked. Everything was going great. The vegetable and chicken stew was exceptional. As a single guy, my meals are usually pretty dismal, so I couldn't help but feel envious of Kevin. I've got to say, this is delicious, I complimented. Oh, that's nice to hear, she replied, puffing her cheeks in mock annoyance. Neither my husband nor daughter ever say it's good. The vegetables are amazing, aren't they? My cousin grows them just over there, Kevin chimed in, slightly tipsy from his beer. I used to play at my aunt's place as a kid. It was always fun. Stella smiled too, clearly enjoying the meal. Sitting there with this happy family made me think about how special family really is. I need to find a wife soon. I blurted out, perhaps a bit too drunk. An awkward silence followed. Stella suddenly froze at my remark. Well, Stephen, let's have another drink. How about some wine I received recently? Kevin suggested, quickly changing the subject. After finishing his beer, he offered me more. I enjoy drinking, but I didn't want to overdo it. Dad, don't drink too much. Stephen has work, so let's keep it moderate, Stella cautioned. He's just happy to have someone to drink with, right, Kevin? She added with a smile as she cleared the empty plates. I had a wonderful time and decided to leave. Stella packed some stew for me to take home. Feeling angry at the stalker who threatened this happy home, I wanted to protect their happiness. The investigation into the stalker was proving difficult, with little information and no leads. Later, the police informed us that Stella's bag had been found. I accompanied her to the station, where it was confirmed to be hers. According to the police, there were bloodstains on the brand logo's metal part, but the blood wasn't Stella. It was likely the perpetrator's. It seemed the stalker had injured his hand. Looking at the bag, I thought, if someone got cut by this mark, it must be a deep wound. One day at my usual supermarket, I ran into the cashier lady busy cleaning. Oh, Stephen, here for the half-price stickers again, she asked. Since that incident, I had become friendly with her. Today's target is the croquettes. They had a potato sale last week, so there should be some leftover croquettes coming out today, I replied. She grinned and gave me a thumbs up. After chatting for a bit, I browsed through the deli section. I was torn between croquettes and fried chicken. As I was deciding, I heard a text sound from behind and saw a man reaching for the fried chicken. Sorry, I hastily moved aside. The man, looking rather unfriendly, glanced at me, grabbed the deli, and walked away. That's when I noticed a significant scar on the back of his hand. Could that scar be from Stella Bag's clasp? I wondered. After he paid at the cashier lady's register and left, I asked her, "Did you see that man's hand injury?" "Oh yes, I've seen him around quite often. He used to have a bandage on his hand for a while, but not today. He works as a part-time delivery guy for a food service. He's delivered here a few times," she explained. So he could have seen inside homes during deliveries. A piece of the puzzle clicked. I felt a flicker of hope in the dark. I invited Stella to come shopping at the supermarket a few times. Moving with crutches was hard for her, but she seemed to enjoy the rare outings. Her smile was always lovely. After repeating these visits for a few days, the man with the scar finally appeared. I quickly hid and peeked out. "Stella, do you recognize that man?" She clung to my arm. "That's him. That's the man who's been following me," she whispered. I immediately called the police. After explaining the situation, they waited at the supermarket entrance. Stella identified him, and the police apprehended him. He was indeed the stalker. He had fallen in love with Stella at first sight during a delivery to her home and had become increasingly obsessed. At least now Stella was safe. Having regained her freedom, Stella invited me to her school festival. It was nostalgic returning to my alma mater. When introducing me to her friends, she jokingly called me her bodyguard, and her friends spontaneously burst into a Whitney Houston song. I sent my support to these endearing juniors. They would someday experience the bittersweetness of working life. I reported the resolution of the case to President Smith and Williams. President Smith was very grateful. "Stephen, you're exceptionally capable with a strong sense of responsibility and perseverance in achieving goals. I'd love to have someone like you at our company," he praised, making me blush. Oddly enough, President Williams gave me a monetary gift, which I decided to share with Tom and Ken, who had covered for me at work. Later, we had a barbecue party at the Smith residence. Throughout the event, President Smith and his wife Stella thanked me repeatedly. Stella was lively and cheerful, entertaining the guests as the party went on. As the evening was winding down, President Smith called me over to his table and offered me a glass of wine. I accepted and listened as he spoke. "I've grown quite fond of you through this incident," he said. "You've helped my wife and Stella. I envy your company's president for having you. I'm considering how we might work together." I was puzzled. "What do you mean?" I asked. Just then, Stella came over, smiling brightly. "Dad, I brought some more drinks," she said. Her smile made all the effort feel worth it. "Stella, can I talk to you for a moment?" President Smith asked. Stella replied, "What is it, Dad?" President Smith said, "I'll get straight to the point. Stephen, I'm wondering if you marry Stella." I accidentally spat out the sake I was sipping. Stella was frozen in shock. "President Smith, that's a pretty heavy joke," I managed to say. "It's no joke," he said. "I wouldn't choose my daughter's partner lightly. After witnessing your actions, I trust you not only with Stella, but also with my business someday." Stella's face turned bright red. "Dad, what are you saying so suddenly?" she stammered. Truthfully, I had feelings for Stella, but accepting such a proposal quickly might seem like I was after her family's wealth. I needed to tell her how I felt. I couldn't bear the thought of our connection ending. I spoke to President Smith. "I'm grateful for your words. I like Stella very much, but accepting this offer lightly would seem disrespectful. I need to be honest with her first." President Smith stared at me intensely, almost overwhelming me. I downed the sake in one gulp and turned to Stella. "Stella, from the moment I met you in that hospital, I fell for you. I'm a simple man, but I want to protect you forever. Will you go out with me? Will you give me your life to cherish? I might make you cry, but I'll never let you suffer." I extended my hand to her, closing my eyes. After what felt like an eternity, her small, warm hand enveloped mine. When I opened my eyes, I saw Stella, tears in her eyes. She jumped into my arms. "You have to take responsibility for making me feel this way," she said. "If you're okay with someone like me, please be with me forever." I'd embraced Stella tightly. Unbeknownst to us, everyone had formed a circle around us, and soon President Smith began clapping. The entire crowd joined in, and applause filled the air. I thought, "What have I done?" And then I fainted. Fast forward a few years, surrounded by well-wishers, Stella and I were at the peak of happiness on our wedding day. I couldn't take my eyes off Stella in her white dress. President Smith, in tears, was comforted by his wife. From now on, I would call them father-in-law and mother-in-law. After that party proposal, I thought I had it all figured out, but the mix of alcohol and nerves made me pass out. I still get teased about it, but I remember every word of my confession. "Stella, do you remember what I said at the party?" I asked. "I forgot," she said with a smile. "Really?" I asked. "So, I want you to say it again. I'll make sure you don't make any mistakes." Stella smiled, "Today the most beautiful I've ever seen. made me vow to protect her for the rest of my life.